here today. The Shire of Harvey acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal community and their cultures, and to elders both past and present. Item 2, record of apologies and leave of absence. Neil. Item 3, applications for leave of absence. Councillor Gillett has an application in for a leave of absence from the 8th to the 17th of July. Any others? Happy to move for a second. Councillor Burney, Councillor Brom. With motions, anyone against the motion?
Yeah, I'll go against that.
Item 4, reading from a book of learning and wisdom. Councillor Collins.
Over 3 billion people on the face of the earth go to bed hungry for a meal every night. But over 4 billion people go to bed every night hungry for a single word of encouragement and recognition. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear or an honest compliment, or even the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around. Any human anywhere will blossom in 100 unexpected talents and capacities, simply by being acknowledged and given the opportunity to do so. From philosopher Kabir Rabir.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Item 5, declarations of members and officers' personal interest. Councillor Jackson.
Yes, I have a financial interest in 12.5.1. I am a financial member of the Harvey District Tourist Bureau. I'm sorry, 5.3, 12.5.3. And I'll leave the chamber.
Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Impartiality for 12.2.1. I'm President of the Brunswick Grounds Committee, so I'll stay in chambers. And 12.5.3, impartiality, I'm the council representative on the Harvey Visitor Centre. I'll stay in chambers and vote accordingly. Thank you.
Councillor Beach.
Thanks, Mr. President. Item 12.5.2, Harvey Recreation Cultural Centre Advisory Group. I'm council delegate on that particular committee. It's an impartiality interest, and I'll stay in the chambers and vote on it.
And I too declare an impartiality interest in item 12.5.2, the Harvey Rec and Cultural Centre Advisory Group. I am also council delegate on that committee, and I will stay in the chambers and deal with it on its merit. Item 6, response to previous questions taken on notice. Ms. Neil. Item 7, public question time. Neil. Item 8, petitions, deputations and presentations. We have Mr. Trent Durwood, Development Manager from McGarry.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? I'll be a little bit shorter tonight because we just had a meeting with Simon, so thanks Simon for that meeting. We did resolve a couple of issues. But really, well, this site, lot 9600, plus the Vibe on the corner, is our development site that we've had for about 3 years now, and I just wanted to go through a bit of an update for you of where we're at and a bit of a planned future for the site and applications you'll be soon considering.
Depending on what we're talking about, I may have impartiality or financial interest in this. I'm not sure which one. My employer owns property adjacent to that.
Okay. There's nothing being considered tonight.
Nothing's being considered. We're fine with that.
There's not on the agenda. Cool. So just a brief history of what we've done so far. We've created that Vibe service station and a coffee drive-through is soon about to open. That was both through subdivision and development applications. The lots that are looking yellow up on your screen there have actually now been created. We should be getting titles in the next couple of weeks. And following that, we've got development applications going through for a showroom, which we're speculatively building on there because we are struggling to get tenants in there. So we're investing in the built form to then get some tenants, so then we can actually get some economic activity happening. That's a DA being considered at the moment. Also, we've done a number of planning approvals in terms of we've done a structure plan to create it more consistent with what the actual uses were under the scheme. We had a bit of an anomaly with the initial structure plan, which was called a light industrial structure plan. This is a showroom commercial area for bulky goods retailing, and it was really important that was fixed up in the structure plan. We've also ensured the new road layout, which has created that north-south connection, was included in that structure plan, and we've also prepared a LDP, which is currently with the Town's administration for approval. In amending the LDP, we've secured some of the access through there. The big issue that I want to talk to you tonight is that we're trying to progress an amendment to the scheme to allow for additional uses on this site, and this includes childcare. We're looking at some others, but we so far have struggled to get more than 2 operating tenants on site, and we just can't seem to get the commercial uses currently permitted in the scheme to meet the market. In doing that, we had the childcare considered by this council in June last year. Unfortunately, it was over the whole site and we had it laid on the table so that we could go and get some further information together, and most importantly, create a site-specific site for it, and also do some further, get some further information for you. Unfortunately, we're at a bit of an impasse with the administration in that they're asking us to do up to over $20,000 worth of additional environmental reporting, when we have already done a significant amount of analysis by environmental consultants and experts and planning consultants, and we want to get the amendment initiated for advertising only, so I can go through that next stage of the process in terms of referral to DEWA and the like, so that we can then define the exact parameters of dust and noise and the like that we have to get on site. So what I'm looking for you guys to hopefully make a decision on next council meeting is a decision to initiate our amendment for childcare for advertising with a number of very clear parameters, what will be built into the scheme for dust monitoring, noise monitoring, so that we can confidence as a developer, as a landowner, go and do that reporting as part of the next stage of the process. We can't viably go and spend $20,000+ on environmental reporting when it's still yet to even be referred to the Environmental Protection Agency or DEWA or given full consideration by the council. So we just want the opportunity, and this is where we've had a disagreement with the planning administration, and whilst we understand their position, we disagree with it. They understand our position and disagree with it. We just need to get it initiated so we can confidently invest in that next stage of information to be able to make it appropriate. So we look forward to getting that up to you next council meeting, and hope you can support, reiterate, just an initiation to the amendment, not approving the use on site. So thank you very much. Happy to answer your questions if that's appropriate.
Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take it from you. I'll leave that there.
Okay, item 9, we'll leave to. Oh, yeah. Okay, item 9, we'll leave till the end of the meeting. Item 10, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary council meeting Tuesday, 26th of May 2020. Councillor Lovett, Councillor Bronwyn. Just need to amend Councillor Dickinson's impartiality interest. Yeah, so,
Do you want me to explain?
yeah.
Yes, so the impartiality is I'm the president of Brunswick Grounds Committee, not a Shire representative. Well, not a council delegate, on the Brunswick Grounds Committee. Yes.
That amendment? Okay, so motion, is anyone against the motion? The motion is carried. Now we have everyone on their screens have a rescission motion from the 26th of May. I don't want that read out, or we're all happy with that?
Councillors, this just relates to the minutes of the meeting which did not have in the written minutes the mover and seconder's name. So in conversation with Walter, we need to revoke the adoption of the minutes from the meeting and then adopt them again with the insertion of moved Adams and seconded Bronwyn. So that is the only change to those minutes that we need to go through this process.
Councillor Birdman.
Councillor Kiwani and I have the financial interest in this item, if I remember correctly.
This is merely just adopting the minutes of the meeting.
That's okay, yeah.
Councillor Bronwyn moved.
Well, I might want to second it, might I? Yeah,
Councillor Adams.
yeah, why not?
I'll put motions. Anyone against the motion? The motion is carried. And that's absolute majority. Yep. Okay. So, with a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes again with that. Councillor Campbell, Councillor Boylan. With motions, anyone against the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Item 11, receipt of the minutes and recommendations from committee. Shire of Harvey Bushfire Advisory Committee, Monday, 18th of May 2020. Councillor Birdman. Second, Councillor Campbell. Any queries, any questions? Put the motion, against the motion. The motion is carried. The Shire of Harvey and Shire of Gardner Joint Town Planning Scheme Committee, Friday, 19th of June 2020.
We've got the minutes.
No, they were distributed electronically.
Distributed electronically. Councillor Jackson, would you like to speak?
Yeah, we have received those in the last day or so. So at the meeting, we adopted the scheme costs, so contributions from developers, and that showed a trend of reducing those scheme costs due to the infrastructure needing to be developed still being reduced as well. We also agreed to pay back monies because those scheme costs were reduced in the last financial year, 17-18. And we also agreed to pay developers out of those scheme costs for contributions they had made. And in our case, it was Trindale and Basket who were the recipients of those payments. So totaling $2 million to Trindale and $3 million to Basket. generally. So that's paid out of those contributions money.
Mr. Hall.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, it was 300,000 to Fastbet, not
Oh,
$3 million.
yes.
So there's a substantial difference. Even I couldn't cover that one up. That's fine.
Sorry, Dave. Thank you. Councillor Stone,
It's
yeah.
only a zero.
So can I ask, is Trendale fully paid out? As I recall from the last meetings that I went to, which was some time ago, that there was enough money to pay out to developers in full now the bridge was completed. Are we withholding money now for something else to be done? How much more of Trendale is there to be developed as well? And is Kingston, I gather Kingston's included in this as well, the joint town planning scheme. How much is left of that as well, and how do the monies all relate to both those areas, Trendale and Kingston?
Mr. Hall.
Through Mr. Chairman, there are quite a number of questions there. Okay, so as some of you will be aware, there were three claims that were outstanding. One from Trendale with regard to a portion of the boulevard, which was just over 1.05 million, and another to do with Kingston Drive at 1.03 million. Those had not been able to be paid because of the way that the scheme was administratively set up, which had segmented accounts. We've had legal advice that says that segmentation is purely administrative and it doesn't avoid or doesn't preclude you from actually paying from the surplus accounts of one to the deficit of the other. So as of tonight's adoption of the minutes, all of Trendale's outstanding liabilities of $2.4 million, so $2.1 million, will be paid back. Fastbet, being South Trendale, is $350,000 for a portion south of the first section of the boulevard, and the bridge monies were used with Main Roads to construct the rest of it because we didn't want to build a bridge with no access road to it. So at the end of this financial year, no developer will be owed any outstanding monies. There is money still left in the accounts, and that is going towards the future construction of Kingston Drive between Paris and Ditchingham. There is external funding for that as well. The remaining surplus monies that are there, through the process of reverse engineering, we are looking at how much, or if there is any surplus that's required to be paid back to any of those developers, based on the assumption that they have maybe overpaid because of the initial cost of the infrastructure was actually anticipated to be a lot higher than the actual costs. So that may be the need to reverse engineer some of that and pay something back. Kingston has 2 stages left of Kingston proper, then it's got lot 1 and another lot 28. So they've probably got around about 4 to 5 years worth of growth of land left. Trendale's got 2 stages left, and based on our discussions, they think they will be finished that sometime next year. South Trendale, they've still got a lot of land left to go. I think that covered all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. No more questions or queries? Move, Councillor Jackson, just a second. Councillor Beach. Put the motion. Anyone against the motion? Motion is carried. Okay, item 12, officers' reports. So we have items to be moved on block, if council so wishes to, is 12.4.1, 12.4.2, 12.4.3 and 12.5.1. Councillor Dickinson,
Hang about.
second Councillor Campbell.
Say that one again.
12.4.1. 12.4.2.
Financial statements.
12.4.3
Yeah,
and 12.5.1.
yeah, all right. I'm happy with that.
Motion, is anyone against the motion? The motion is carried. Okay, we'll move to item 12.1.1, Bushfires Act delegation. The recommendation on page 14 and 15. Councillor Adams.
Yeah, before we go too far with that, I have expressed on occasion the concern that we sometimes over delegate. Even John Sable agreed with that on occasion. But if everybody else wants to go along with that, I'm happy with it. But the explanation, a very full explanation of what delegation was all about, the comment was made that very often that it will refer to CEO, and that will refer to the CEO of the emergency services, correct?
It depends what act. So it depends on what act you're reading. So if it's the Litter Act, or if it's the Bushfires Act, or if it's whatever act, if it says the CEO, most often it refers to the state government authority who is administering that legislation.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is that where that occurs, whether it's in this or otherwise, that's made clear which CEO we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if that applies to this, I know that.
Councillor Beach.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President. Likewise with Councillor Adams, I did go away with some trepidation that there was a great deal of delegation being given to the CEO, and I assume our CEO, because these are our delegations. And it didn't refer to any consultation with any third party, if you like, so whether it be the Chief Fire Brigade officer or CFIS or our own Chisholm, I think. Anyway, staff have approached me and suggested that in the delegation, we can't change the delegation because that comes straight out of the Act, but underneath it says council conditions on this delegation. In most instances it says nil, and the wording that I've been suggested to propose to go in there that says decisions made following consultation with qualified personnel. Or words to that effect.
Yes.
You're happy with that?
So I'm happy.
So it really just reinforces the fact that someone picking this up says, oh, the CEO is authorised to tell someone that they can light a fire or not light a fire, or to burn some rubbish in the scenario, whatever the delegation happens to be. This just sort of informs the reader that the CEO can do that, but must take advice, I guess. And I'd like to see that included. And I don't know whether you need a motion for that or it's just by agreement.
And can I just add, that would not be for, I think, attachments 8 and 11, because 8 is for includes the Chief Bushfire Control Officer, and so does 11. So you already have a qualified person on those delegations. So.
Councillor Burgoyne.
Separate question, but similar. We established last week that the quotes calm officer, which is a department that no longer exists because that hasn't been updated.
That's right.
But now similar, I've realised we're talking about the CEO of the authority, which no longer exists either because that's the defence commissioner.
No, we're talking, when we say CEO here, we're talking about this CEO.
It's quoted in here, this includes the CEO of the authority, defence.
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, that's the commissioner, it's not a CEO any longer. So when that gets updated, which is the question, when that gets updated, will these delegations have to come back or?
If it's
Because also you've got the emergency services that are also being updated as well,
Yeah.
so.
If
that-
any, yeah, so if any act is altered, then we should review our delegations in line with notification of a change in legislation. And if there is a change in legislation, then we need to then update our delegations in line with those changes.
So can I confirm that is council happy if that additional wording to the council conditions on this delegation are included in delegations 1 to 7, 9 to 10 and delegation 12? And we'll do that administratively. You prefer it to be part of the recommendation? Okay. Leave it as an amendment.
Happy to move that as an amendment, councillor Lee?
Yes, and what's the mover will accept it as part of the recommendation?
Second, okay. Okay, we're all clear on that? Good. Councillor Adams, second. Councillor Lee. Okay, no more questions or queries? Okay, we'll put the motion. Is anyone against the motion? Motion is carried. With an absolute majority. Item 12.2.1, local roads and community infrastructure program. That's the recommendation on page 19. Councillor Adams.
I have a question to ask. On this really, during the period of the storm, there was a difficulty getting contractors to do, because everybody had a storm, there was difficulty getting contractors to clean up the rubbish apparently. I asked the question, with all these programs and projects that are coming forward, is there going to be enough by way of qualified contractors to be able to carry these things out in a timely manner and a timely quality of work? There's going to be an awful lot of work.
Yeah, through the chair, I believe so. When you look at the projects, the Leisure Drive Shared Path, we've got a contractor on contract that builds paths, and he's been well on it, so he's already aware of that project. The CCTV, Mr. Winter is progressing that at the moment. The path lighting, that's already underway in terms of getting that organised. We've already done stage 1, this is stage 2. The coastal infrastructure improvements, Mr. Hall will be dealing with that, and that'll be through the environmental officer, and maybe use prisoners or, labour like that. For ground parking, that's a design, we'll go up to some quotes there. There's several companies that have done Jack Civil, Geograph Civil, Carboni Brothers, who've done a fair bit of work for us, given that it's under the threshold, 10 threshold. Landscape improvements and building up, that'll be an in-house project. Paris Road, next one, that'll be an in-house project. Cooking up lights, we're already looking at that one. York Road, safety improvements there, that'll be sort of in-house plus, line marking and whatnot, and signage. The safety barrier, that's just ordering the materials and getting them installed. The rest area in the South West Highway, that'll be tendered out, or going out, and the roads. Solar lighting, that's basically we're looking at that at the moment, getting some quotations and whatnot. So, yeah, can't really see an issue delivering these projects next financial year, because we've got all of next financial year to deliver this.
Thank you.
Let's move Councillor Carboni, second Councillor Adams. Motion, anyone against the motion? The motion is carried 13-0, absolute majority. Okay, item number 12.3.1, report of delegations, planning and building. Move Councillor Bronze, second Councillor Dickinson. Any questions? Queries? I'll put the motion. Anyone against the motion? Motion is carried. 13-0. That's the majority. Okay, community development. Item number 12.5.2, Harvey Recreation and Cultural Centre Advisory Group, terms of reference. Recommendation on page 37. Two representatives. Councillor Cabana.
I'll nominate Councillor Leach.
Councillor Leach, do you accept?
Thank you. Can I nominate Shire President? Winners are on there already, and you've got a few ideas about the place.
Happy to accept. Let's ask someone else who's got a burning ambition. Councillor Bron.
I nominate Councillor Gordon. She's on the
Deputy, yes. Yep. Any other nominations at all? No?
So moved.
Move Councillor Cabana, second Councillor Herdorn. I'll put the motion. Anyone against the motion? Motion is carried. 13-0. That's the majority. Item 12.5.3, Harvey District Tourist Bureau Community Budget Commission. Councillor Campbell, is that clear?
Thanks, Mr. President. I just have an alternate motion for this item.
Councillor Adams. I second it. Councillor Campbell, you have to move. You're a seconder. Councillor Bromwell. Councillor, you wish to speak? Your alternative.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Bromwell, for seconding this alternate motion that's on the screen. Councillors, I've given this much thought, and let me preempt my comments by saying that I enjoy travelling, and when doing so, I use booking platforms and websites to plan my accommodation and holiday activities. And if there's a tourist visitor centre at my destination, then in most cases I venture into it as it presents a great opportunity to talk to locals and gain local knowledge of the area. So although I'm not involved in the tourism industry as such, I'm certainly a user of tourism services and booking platforms, and acknowledge the importance that these tourist centres play. So in light of that, I see the need to ensure Council allocates funding appropriately to support tourism within our Shire. And that is why I presented this alternate motion for your consideration today. Firstly, I propose the sum of $105,760 be listed for consideration in the 2021 budget for the Harvey Tourist Bureau. And this includes the $6,000 for the maintenance and cleaning of the shrine. This is in line with the officer's recommendation and is significantly more than what has been budgeted for the Harvey Tourist Centre in previous years. I feel that this will provide the Board of Management, the manager and the staff of the Harvey Visitor Centre
financial security and confidence that they can deliver their objectives as outlined in their funding request for the next 12 months while delivering a tourist service. Secondly, I am disappointed that the Australian Tourist Centre that received funding in the last budget has not been as well activated as we hoped for. Therefore, I cannot support the ongoing funding of the Australian Visitor Centre in its current format at this time. Thirdly, I recommend that Action 3.1 of the Shire's Economic Development Strategy to develop a local tourism development plan at the cost of $40,000 be brought forward and listed for consideration in the 2021 draft budget. In doing so, this will ensure that Council has sound direction in the delivery of tourism throughout the Shire, confidence in the future funding, and provide the basis for the delivery of further actions outlined in this strategy. And finally, I request the CEO investigate a location for a smaller tourism information presence in Australia until the completion of the tourism development plan, in which I'm confident a more desirable location will be identified. Councillors, I hope that you will give this motion due consideration, that you view this as sound fiscal management plan whilst supporting the Harvey Tourist Centre for the next 12 months. And by bringing forward the tourism strategy plan will provide councillors and staff a clear direction and remove any ad hoc planning and funding in the future.
Councillor Bromwich, you.
Shall I say it all?
Anyone who wishes to speak against it? Or, yes, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. If Councillor Campbell's motion is adopted, could you tell me the date that funding for the Australian Centre would conclude? So it's the end of August.
I'll pass that question on to the manager of the Community and Economic Development.
Councillor, would you mind repeating that question for me, please? Quite catchy.
Oh, sorry, I was just wondering if the motion was accepted, what date would this term of funding for the Australian Centre cease?
Councillor, my understanding would be that it would finish at the end of this financial year. Yeah, so.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, don't want to speak against it. I've just got a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind, to the move. Councillor Campbell, item 3, your recommendation is very similar to item 1 of the officer's recommendation, except it's double the price. But you're asking for an allocation of $40,000 to develop a tourism development plan. The officers are saying undertake an independent review of the Harvey Australian Visitor Centre at the cost of $20,000. So is there a fundamental difference in what you read and understand that's in the Shire's Economic Development Strategy against what's proposed? And whilst I've always had an issue with the shrine and it not getting cleaned properly and been on the receiving end of complaints over the years about that, $6,000 seems rather a lot of money to keep that place clean. That's $115 a week. If that's the case, where do I apply it? Because I think an hour's work and keep that place every week up to scratch. So I think that might need a little bit of teasing, and whether or not we can take that out of Councillor Campbell's budget, and whether or not the Shire themselves can adopt that as part of a cleaning regime. We have a vehicle going doing toilets. I don't really know, and I probably should have asked that question earlier, but only getting this late this afternoon didn't allow me to do that. So $6,000 to clean that place once a week, it only needs a bit of a sweep and cobweb, it seems rather low money, that was all. But I'm more interested in the difference between paragraph 1 of the office recommendation on 44 and paragraph 3 of your recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Beach. I'm just unsure of the amount of money that you're talking about in regards to delegation.
It's on the second line. It says support the proposal to undertake an independent review of the Harvey and Australian Visitor Centres completed by the 30th of November and an allocation of $20,000 to be listed consideration of funding in 2021 draft budget. You've not included that in your
Councillor Campbell,
alternative.
would you prefer for the manager of community economic development to outline the difference between the independent review of the visitor centre versus the full tourism strategy?
Councillor, the officer's recommendation, part 1, is to conduct an independent operational review of the Harvey Australian Visitor Centre. So that sort of study would be fully sort of focused on the operations of the visitor centre, whereas the amended recommendation by Councillor Campbell is to conduct a local tourism development strategy for the whole Shire, which would probably be quite a bit broader in its scope. So on one hand, you've got a focused study on reviewing the operations of the visitor centre as compared to a tourism development strategy for the whole of the Shire. Does that answer your query, Ken?
Well, yeah, it does. So if we went with Councillor Campbell's suggestion, the 2 visitor centres would certainly be captured in that review anyway. Correct. Okay. So we're broadening the scope.
Yes.
By broadening the scope, we're adding $20,000 to the budget. Yep.
Obviously. If you look at sort of the last line of part 3, which talks about including
the review
the reviews.
Well, that should be Harvey and Australian, but this gets to, there won't be any Australian.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, right on. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It conflicts me greatly to actually speak against Councillor Campbell's motion. To those of you that listened to my discussion last week's agenda briefing, I have very serious concerns in relation to exactly what's happening in relation to the Harvey Tourist Bureau and the Australian Tourist Bureau. That said, I'm certainly concerned if we suddenly cease funding as of this financial year to the Australian Visitor Centre. It was funded last year with a view that with Hinton Cottage closing at that time, we needed an alternative place for a visitor centre. And as such, Council agreed to fund this interim arrangement, and because of a series of circumstances, it has certainly not been optimal. I would certainly agree with that. However, I would certainly have concerns if we suddenly ceased funding and effectively, and as a consequence, ceased any tourist information opportunities within the Auckland area. I certainly agree that we need to do a review. I certainly agree that things need to change. However, I do not support the notion that we should simply cease funding. I believe that the officer's recommendation, whilst I certainly don't support in its entirety, I believe attempts to achieve the balance of maintaining presence whilst undertaking a review and provides us with a way forward. So on that basis, I believe that we should support the original officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Another speaker for the motion. Councillor Loveland.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Australian Business Centre, we've seen the numbers of this, of what we funded, and also the number of people that have been going through the door. It's closed a couple of days a week. I actually had someone go in the other day. I've been to the centre, I've seen it. I actually asked someone to go and have a look just to give me a new person's perspective on it. The comment was, quote, "What the bloody hell is that? It's in a cupboard." And they said it presented no value to them as a visitor. I support this because I think we do need to really look at it with fresh eyes. It moved across from Henton Cottage. Henton Cottage really just provided a display rack of brochures and not a lot else, to be honest. And I think that we need to pull back and revisit this as council planning motion.
Another speaker again. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like Councillor Simpson, I have reservations and mixed feelings speaking against this, but we have a manager in the managing the visitor centre who's been there less than a year, who has been employed since the last round of funding was approved. That came about due to unforeseen circumstances. The reason that the visitor centre has requested the amount of funding that they did was because they realised that the operation of visitor centres has changed to what traditionally used to happen. It used to be a shop front where people could go and visit. Now, the majority of travellers, myself included, we use the internet when we are booking our accommodation or looking at the attractions in an area. The Harvey Visitor Centre, under its current management and current board, want to pursue the way forward of how visitor centres are used now, not how they used to be. So the funding that they requested was inclusive of that. The funding that they requested for the shrine management was not just for cleaning. It was also to maintain the displays and update the displays that are in that facility. The way of displaying in tourist attractions now is not just a matter of having things on a board. Times have changed. Public expectation of a display in a facility is not just photos and a caption. They want more than that. So the funding would allow the visitor centre to look at pursuing more modern functions. I speak against this motion because I don't think that we should lose a presence in Australian. The presence that we had at Henton College was a limited presence to begin with, and it would be good if we can give them more time. We've had circumstances like COVID that have come along, which has meant that it's had to close. So there's a lot of issues at the visitor centre having to deal with that are totally unforeseen, and they're trying to move forward. And for that reason, for them to be able to move forward, I can't support this motion. Thank you.
Another speaker for the motion. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to apologise. Right, Australian Business Centre location it's poor. We all know that. Funding must be based on the ability of the funding body to provide service This hasn't happened, as we've heard. 3 people a day is not what is required to make this a viable option. This is not, it is simply in the wrong location. If we do not support this motion, we are voting to spend public monies on a visitors centre that does not deliver, and in my view, was badly conceived in relation to its location and also its ability to provide the information required. So all you've got there is a bunch of handouts. I've been there and had a look at the place, very small, not open very often, and for short periods of time. So I don't see how you can spend public money on something that isn't working.
Another speaker again, Councillor Coleman.
Thanks, Mr. President. I recognise the intent of Councillor Campbell's motion, but if we withdraw the funding, then we won't have any budget to move it, relocate it, improve it, which is what our aim is. Can we not, once we've allocated the budget, can we not work with staff and the staff at the Australian Centre and the Harvey Centre and redesigning hours or get better value for that money in the interim whilst we're doing a report? One of the first, lessons in business is you never close something down if you don't have to, because it's very difficult to start it up and get going again. So I think that we'd be better off reallocating those funds, working with people, perhaps pull it back a bit, sure, but keep it going whilst we get this happening, and then put the bulk of the funds that are in the budget into this new U-Butte centre. I think it would be it would be remiss of us to withdraw that money out of the budget altogether. Thank you.
Another speaker for. Speaker again. Councillor Adams.
Yeah. I just flag for a start that I have another motion alternative which doesn't take any money away from the current situation and far more simpler, a lot less complex. But certainly as far as the location of the Australian Bureau, it's a total waste of time. And it costs the ratepayer another 0.5% on their rates this year to put it there. However, having said that, in the interim, I don't believe we should take it away. At least it's there and it's getting a few visitors. I prefer to leave it there, leave the allocation of money as it is, and allow the Harvey District's Tourist Board to come up with a overall plan for the whole of the Shire. What got right up my nose, I suppose, in the first instance, we spoke about, or the original recommendation was an emphasis on Australind, and Councillor Coleman didn't like that. She wanted to talk about equal representation, Australind and Harvey. Well, let's get away from this Harvey business and Australind. We're talking about tourism in the whole of the Shire, and that's where we should direct our funds and our attention and our focus, yes, for the whole of the Shire. So, yes, I'm sympathetic towards Councillor Campbell's view, but I think we should let things stand and let the Harvey's Tourist Bureau come up with a plan whilst he. Having said that, the Australind office wants to rock it up its backside to make it function a bit better. Thank you.
Councillor Berger on a question.
A couple, actually. Going through the report, we've, according to the motion back in July of 2019, for a management agreement between the Shire and Harvey District Tourist Bureau for a term of 2 years, commencing 1st September, expiring 31st of August 2021. That includes the following conditions. We don't have a problem breaking that agreement, as far as the funding goes.
I'll pass that on to the Manager of Community and Economic Development. We're glad for that turn.
Councillor, your questions for one, and the initial management agreement was or is for a 2-year term that expires 31st of August 2021. There is, but that agreement on its own doesn't guarantee that council will continue to provide operational funds for the centre. If the alternative motion was successful tonight, that would obviously mean that there's no operating grant, and yeah, the Harvey for the Australian Visitor Centre wouldn't have operating funds to continue. So the agreement would, that being the case, the agreement would terminate.
Okay, so we don't have a problem with that. The other question, I'm not sure who's able to answer it, but condition E in that same motion was the requirement for the HDTB to prepare an annual business plan for approval by council that includes key objectives, strategies and performance indicators and demonstrates the viability of the visitor information service in Australia. I would assume that's not due until the 31st of August. That be correct? So we have no idea what they've got planned for next year.
Councillor, that condition wasn't met to produce that business plan. Previous manager had prepared a draft plan that was submitted to myself and some feedback was provided. Unfortunately, due to a personal situation, the former manager had to finish up quite quickly, and there was a little bit of a gap between appointing a new person, and it was something that wasn't completed, the business plan. Certainly, if depending on what happens tonight, there will be a requirement moving forward for the next financial year.
Well, it was it's been written in motion again, so it was like a double. We have to break it there and bring it back up there. Okay. Thanks.
Unless Councillor Boylan and Councillor Cavani wish to exercise their right,
I have a question.
Another question.
No, I was speaking yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. I was only asking questions before, now I'm asking. I've listened to the arguments and for and against, and I was in two minds. I would love to see part of this go through, like the review of the strategy. The hardest part I've got to overcome, though, is not funding the Australian part, for the simple reason that if, as Council commented, you take it away, you can't put it back in a hurry. You've got no room to play with. While the money's there, our opportunity comes up to shift it to do something else. The business plan comes forward and they've got some grand plans that nothing's going to happen if there's no money. So that's the bit that sticks to my craw a bit. It's the fact that the money's gone over the last 12 months, but we can't do anything without the money being there in the future either. So that's the only reason I'm going
to Councillor
Just like you to recognise the fact that if this motion doesn't get, I have.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, would you like?
Thank you, councillors, for your comments. And I find it interesting that there's a lot of acknowledgement around the table that the Australian Visitor Centre is not being well activated, and yet we're still quite happy to put $55,000 down there to keep it going. For Councillor Simpson, there will be a presence of a tourism service down at Australind, and I'll leave that to the CEO to identify, but it will certainly not cost $55,000. And once we've done the local tourism development plan, I'm hoping that a better location will be identified and funding can be allocated. But at least we're allocating funds on some sound planning and not this ad hoc financial funding. So in short, I see this alternate motion allows for the Harvey Tourist Centre to continue to develop a business and marketing plan with substantial increase in funding from what it's received in previous years. Just so councillors are aware, it got $70,000 last year. This year I'm giving it $105,000. And it also brings forward the local tourism development plan, therefore removing the piecemeal and ad hoc funding that we've seen over the years and provides council with direction so as to better spend the ratepayers' money. Thank you.
Question, Councillor.
Sorry, question. Well, thank you very much. Just clarifying your comment, Councillor Campbell. If the visitor centre is closed, what's the alternative that the CEO is proposing that we're not privy to?
I'm not proposing. Councillor Simpson, I don't have an alternative. The alternative motion was for the Shire CEO to investigate alternative locations.
Sorry, so just clear, if the visitor centre is closed, as per the recommendation or the motion of Councillor Campbell, there won't be presence in Australia until such time as there has been a review, an alternative location found, etc., etc. So we're actually talking about some extended period of time. Is that correct?
I'm just reading from the alternative motion that's before us in regards to providing a further report to council in July 2020. So we would work to that time frame, but at this stage, I am just reading from the motion and I haven't looked at any alternative locations, and I will be required to do that and report back to the next council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so good motion. Is there anyone against the motion?
Do we have the is it the tied vote, is it?
Yeah, you got a point?
No, just wondered what the delay was.
Motion is lost. You have an alternative. I do. Councillor Adam. I do. May I please?
Just bringing it up on
Just bringing it
screen,
up.
Councillor Adams.
Would you like to move your alternative, Councillor Adam?
Yes, well, I'd like to address your attention to the screen.
Is there a second?
And ask for a seconder.
I'll second it.
Fergie, would you like to move? Councillor Fergie.
It says amendment to alternate motion. Amendment to Councillor Campbell's alternate motion.
No, the original.
The original.
To the original
Officer's recommendation.
officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Second, Councillor Coleman. Councillor Birch, please.
Does this completely replace the office recommendation on page 44, or is it going to be part of 3 or 2? Or and then is there an additional paragraph into the officer's recommendation, I think I'm asking?
I thought that was made clear.
It doesn't say, it just says amendment to
Well, it didn't. Well, that's what they might have said, but the original said a bit different to that. Anyway, can I speak?
Councillor Adams, I believe that's a question from Councillor Beach in
Right.
regards to where does this amendment
So I can answer
in
it. Yes. Right. Well, you got confused earlier on. Sure, it's not 8.
Just then.
No, all this alters is the item as it stands. You've got 1, 2, and 3 on page 42 on the original. That says 3A that the Harvey District Tourist Bureau develops a plan with greater emphasis on promoting Australian Visitor Centre. All I'm altering is that little bit paragraph there, A, that I'm leaving everything else in place, the $55,000 for that Australian Centre. All I'm altering is 3A. B stands as it is, all the rest stands as it is. Yeah, happy with that? All I'm getting rid of basically is the argument that says we emphasise any particular centre and that the Tourist Bureau develops a tourist plan that embraces the whole of the Shire. Leave the money in place as it is. Certainly the Australian office there is a waste of time, but without it we have nothing else. And until we get something else, which I hope that the Harvey Tourist Bureau will address, let's leave it as it is, at least we've got something there. You happy with that, Mr. Councillor Beach?
So in a nutshell, this on the screen, it replaces 3A. Is that what you're trying to say?
In a nutshell, yes.
That was quite simple. Yeah.
Well, I am a very simple.
Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Councillor Adams, do you mean that the funding is the Shire's the Shire officer's recommendation of 154,760, or are you recommending that the Harvey Visitor Centre's requested 180,182,000? Amount.
I'm suggesting that all those fundings remain in place. As per the officer's recommendation. All that funding remains in place. Not altering that at all. All I want to do is get rid of this business about emphasising one or the other and get the whole of the Shire to be emphasised, if you like.
There is speaker against the motion. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, here we are, $55,000 going down to Australian, and the councillor that moves the motion agrees that it's in the wrong place. So once again, I cannot, hand on my heart, allocate $55,000 down to Australian for absolutely nothing. Please, I ask councillors to once again look at the funding for this. And let's not do some ad hoc funding and throw money away, ratepayers' money away to fund the Australian Tourist Centre. Let's wait till we've got a strategic plan and let's allocate the money accordingly. Thank you.
Speaker 4. Question, Councillor Dickinson.
Sorry, I have another question, Mr. President. So, if the funding for the shrine management is not included, can I ask who is going to manage the shrine, please? Because at the moment, the visitor centre manages the visitation.
Question to me.
Whoever.
Mr. Quinlan.
Councillor, the answer to your question will be if the funding was not provided for the Shire management, then the Shire will need to look at some alternative arrangements to at least keep the toilets in the display clean and tidy. That would be the answer.
Councillor Collins, you have a question?
I do, thank you, Mr. President, and I'm not sure whether this gets addressed. I do to address it to perhaps Mr. Winter, perhaps. If, and I understand fully putting $55,000 into an establishment that's not working. I agree with that. It's not the right thing to do. However, the way that I read it, and I'm new, so I'll be the first to say I'm blonde and I'm new, and I'll make a mistake. If we put $55,000 in the budget, Mr. Winter, does it mean that we can't manage that so that the visitor centre is drip fed until such time as we relocate it and use that money to re-establish it in a position within the next 12 months? Does it mean that we have to spend it as we have done, which seems to be or be agreed that it's a bit of a waste of money? If we approve that $55,000, does it have to continue as it is now, or can we reallocate that in the next 12 months to a better position? I'm sorry, I don't know who addressed that to other than yourself.
That's fine, thank you, Councillor. That really depends on the information that we're giving to the Tourist Bureau. If we have that allocation in the budget, it's up to us to determine whether we're putting conditions on it to the Tourist Bureau, and normally we would put conditions on, we'd give them the money, they then administer it through the course of the year. If we don't choose to do that, if we want to have that money sitting in the budget, isolated for when council wants to spend that, then we would need to negotiate that through to the Tourist Bureau. Mr. Quinlivan might want to add to that, sure.
Okay, so what the current practice is that the operating grants are provided quarterly, and there are conditions attached to that, and one of them is that they must provide their financial reports each month to the Shire. So in answer to your question, the opportunity is there if we want to make that a monthly sort of payment instead of a quarterly one, which is currently the case. Up until now, yeah, the practice has been to provide a quarterly grant.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. My question was actually asked by Councillor Conlon, so thank you for that. That basically covered it. I guess my concern at this particular point in time in our discussion is very much focused on the potential perception that this council is potentially allocating money in the next budget inappropriately if it funds the Austrian Business Centre. And this is something that I think as councillors we are all very much aware of, hence the discussion in relation to our concerns and attempting to produce the best outcome moving forward for this particular aspect of the promotion of the Shire. And having listened to Mr. Winter's response and Mr. Quinlivan's response to Councillor Collins' discussion and question, it certainly gives me some heart that we can actually achieve the desired result of maintaining a allocation in the budget, while still addressing Councillor Campbell's concern in relation to the appropriate allocation of funding, ratepayers funded.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll speak for the motion. On the proviso that the mover and seconder accept what the tourist or the visitor centre requested in the first place. That's 125,000. So if they consider adopting that as the motion, so 180,000 in essence, then I speak for the motion. And I speak for because if we're serious about tourism, then we should be putting more money in. It's as simple as that. And to take Councillor Campbell's point, or her point in her recommendation of a $40,000 strategy that's somehow going to produce some silver bullet where 1 million people are going to turn up on the Harvey Shire's doorstep next year or the year after. I mean, how many strategies do we have to have? How many things do we have to be involved in? Hungry Geograph, partnership thing we're in, all the other things that we've been in over the years. And that, if we're serious about it, let's fund the centres that we've got. Now, as with the 55,000 for the Australian visitor centre, those councillors that were here at last year's budget session would remember that this was left out of the budget. And I moved that we put into the budget, seconded by Councillor Simpson. And I certainly can concur with everything that Councillor Simpson said when he spoke against Councillor Campbell's motion. And we put that funding in to see what it would be like in Australia. We put a two-year time on it at the time, as I recall, and we put a sunset clause in that motion that it was reviewed after 2 years, and we saw how it went down there. We knew fair well at the time, and people would remember at the time we were talking about the premises that we were going to build at Ridley Place and whether that would incorporate a tourist centre or a tourist bureau or whatever in that facility at Ridley Place. So this was an interim place where we put something in the meantime until something further was developed. So that was the history behind it. That's why it was done. Now, I noticed in the agenda briefing last week, even though I wasn't there, that numbers are down going through the centre. Well, we've been in lockdown since the end of February. No one's been travelling. So how can we get a true indication of what's been happening out there when there's virtually been no one travelling in that time? Now, the park was open in Ridley Place on the weekend, and I've never been bombarded with so many nice things about the Shire in such a short space of time than what I got in the last few days since that park was open. It was chock-a-block, so much so that I've got photos on my phone that I haven't forwarded on yet because everyone parked with boats parked, and there was people that couldn't park their boats, current boat trailer, because there was cars taking up the spots for the boats. So we've got a park that people all want to come and see now, want to visit. Beautiful entrance statement that I've seen on the north side of Australind. We're starting to get somewhere with Australind, and what do we want to do? Shut down the tourist centre ahead of time. So I would ask that the mover and seconder accept what's been requested, and we move the officer's recommendation. Well, I'm moving your motion, but I'd like the mover and seconder to take the what's been requested, include that as a part of the motion.
Well, no. We're talking about what, $25,000. If we can maintain, or if the councillors will agree that maintain the Australian office as is, and let's kid ourselves, I'm totally underwhelmed by it, but there. If they're willing to accept that, I'm not going to get my neck. Is it too much to know about 125?
Yeah, Robin, do you as seconder
Yeah, I'll second it.
agree to the requested amount?
Yeah, I agree. I can second without agreeing.
As seconder for the motion.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
You have to. Is everyone clear on now what is? Thanks, Lloyd. Councillor Campbell.
I just want to add an amendment to that motion if I can.
Yes.
I ask that, what am I asking? That consideration for funding in the 2021 draft budget for the $40,000 for the, to bring forward the local tourism development plan to be completed by the 28th of February 2021 and include the review of the Harvey Visitor Centre. The reason I want this amendment included is that we are in the business of governance, and at the moment we have no strategic tourism plan for the whole of the Shire. So if we don't bring this forward, then guess where we're going to be next year, councillors? Straight back here again, discussing funding for Harvey and Australind and Brunswick or whatever else may develop. So I just ask that the mover consider that being incorporated in his amendment.
Can I just clarify that, Councillor Campbell? Will that replace dot point 1 in the officer's original recommendation? So that will be replaced with those words as part of the previous alternative motion. But mover and seconder meant to support that.
Well, I didn't intend this motion of mine to get tied up with a lot of arguments about money. That wasn't the purpose of the exercise at all. Yeah, it's only going to be very exciting. Surely, the fact that we've requested the Harvey District Tourist Bureau to present a plan covers all of these sorts of things. You know, if they want more dough, then yes, they'll ask for it. But I think we are over complexing the thing.
That's a no, Councillor.
Well, yes, but I thought I'd say why.
Okay.
I don't know, yeah. I don't know if it's second one, sorry? Leave it as it is.
Councillors, if the mover and seconder are not willing to include it in the officer's recommendation, then I would suggest that the amendment needs to stand alone and be voted on by council to consider whether it is included in the officer's recommendation.
Oh, yeah. It's a foreshadow motion.
It's
a foreshadow motion, there's no second.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo Councillor Cavani. I believe that what Councillor Cavani is trying to remove is a foreshadowed motion from the original motion. So we need to vote on Councillor Adams first, and then if that gets defeated, we go back to that. That's my take on the matter.
Yeah, we agree. Yeah, we agree. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Beach and Councillor Carboni, can you please clarify that again? I believed that we were working on an amendment to the original motion in regards to the funding, which was agreed to by the mover and seconder. Which would become substantive, and then we have another amendment which has been requested by Councillor Campbell, which has not been accepted by the mover, so it will need to be voted on as a separate amendment to become part of the substantive motion, seeing though it hasn't been accepted by the mover. Is that the way that you?
No, I thought we were talking about Councillor Cavani's request for the 2021 as requested.
He requested that we agree and we agree.
That's right. So the way I understand it, they haven't accepted the amendment. There's no seconder for the amendment, so the amendment lapses.
Which amendment are we talking about?
Councillor Campbell's amendment, they've got a seconder, so that lapsed.
That was
So it
only
reverts back
seconded
to
by
the.
This amendment. Councillor Campbell's is an amendment to the original motion, and as such, there is the ability through the process of motion through WOLGA for it to be voted on to become part of the motion. Because Councillor Adams isn't agreeable to include it in the officer's recommendation now, means that it will need to stand by itself and to be voted on.
Second, there is second,
Yeah, I'll do.
second councillor Brom. I'll put the motion.
So what are we voting on? Sorry.
Now voting on.
I just know
So we're voting on the amendment.
Not yours.
No, we're voting on the amendment that councillor Campbell, second councillor Brom.
Which is basically raising it from 20,000 to 40,000, is that right?
So we have a strategy in place for the Shire.
Yes.
I'll review it straight.
Okay. All clear?
Yes.
Clear as muddy water. Okay, so I'll put the motion. Is anyone against the motion? The motion's carried. So that now becomes.
No, it's now 40, isn't it?
Okay. So that is now the motion.
Mine's still
So,
Yes. It's added to it.
yeah, that's just added.
Oh, okay.
Now I'll vote.
So I've done more addition and subtraction than we have.
Okay, all right.
So is everyone, councillor Brom?
I want to move the motion.
Motion has already been moved
Oh, that's
by
right. Then I want
Adams
to.
originally, and there is the acceptance of the mover and seconder to include the increased funds, plus the movement of the amendment which comes into the original officer's recommendation and replaces dot point one with the 6.1%.
So is everyone clear?
No.
Dot point one, part 1A, subsection C.
I'm
Are all clear?
confirming the amount of money we voted for this one, councillor Cavoni.
So,
Yes, because the mover and seconder agreed to include it. Yes.
so we're
Yes.
1A. Okay. Sure, everyone's had enough. So,
Yeah, I think I need a drink.
So I'll put the motion. Is there anyone against the motion? Motion is carried. Someone like to say with the councillor Jackson. Okay, item 13, elected amendment motions of which previous notice has been given. Yeah, we have. Alternative.
I've got the alternative motion.
So we have the alternative motion on the screen. You should move that, councillor Brom. Is there a seconder?
Yeah,
Councillor Brom, is there a seconder? That motion, councillor Lovett. Councillor Brom.
thank you, Mr. President, through this. Facebook is something used by most people. and is very widely used within the community. In fact, I put some information out on Facebook itself to gauge the community's response, and they've come back positively, except for 2 people. And the question was asked, would you like the Shire of Harvey to have a Facebook page or not? So the reason I believe that it would be good is simply because it is there's a diverse amount of people that use it. It allows good communication between the council and others. It can be used as an educational tool. It can be used as a promotional tool for the Shire. And I believe that this put forward in conjunction with my conversation with the CEO meets both the requirement of looking for a good, effective Facebook page and the ability of staff to manage and implement it. Thank you.
Speaker against?
Yes.
Yes, right.
Sorry, John.
That's all right.
That's the way it is, mate. We were told, we're being told that Facebook is used by everybody. Now, last week, we were told that Facebook is rather more a younger person's tool, correct? Older person's tool. Facebook's an older person's tool.
It's a mixture.
I understood it was a younger person. Anyway, that beside the point. And I mean, obviously, Facebook users are going to say, yeah, let's have it because they, love their few minutes of power, What concerns me about this Facebook, and I've used it over the last election time, I've cut the bloody thing off because, to me, it's an opportunity for everybody to hop on the bandwagon and give their view of things and generally, sort of rubbish what's going on or promote something else. I'm more concerned, and I asked last week, what's the difference between Instagram and Facebook? Instagram, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong this time, is a more positive tool, correct? Right. And that's what we're on. We're also told that if we're on Facebook, somebody's got to man the thing, or woman the thing, or person the thing, more or less 24 hours a day, so that we can counter any negative stuff. And by the Lord Harry, there'll be it. I prefer to follow what I think was implied, is the idea that we stick with what we've got and not step into this a bit, well, from a local government's point of view, iffy territory. So, yeah, I'm sorry, John, I've got to make a main thing, mate.
Speaker for the motion. Question, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much. So this was not one of the items that I was going to become terribly involved in because I, as I say, I'm not a Facebook user myself. But I just wanted to ask, in relation to Facebook, I know that it comes with bells and whistles and the opportunity to comment in real time, 24 hours a day. Is that what is being proposed with Facebook strategy? Or are we looking at a mechanism whereby we have a Shire of Harvey Facebook page and we provide information to the wider community and turn off the ability for comments?
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, you can't turn off commenting on pages. No.
Okay.
And just to mention that this motion is to develop a communication strategy, consider a Facebook page as part of that communication strategy.
Which is basically what the original recommendation said anyway.
Will there be any other further discussion? Councillor Bone.
I spoke briefly on this before, and someone who's probably embroiled in a bit of one-way skullduggery at the moment from the Hairy Armpit Brigade in Biddingham. You can probably see what's installed if you make a decision in here that some people don't like. Now, my question is, that I pose to you, is who's going to protect us when you slam, whether you're a councillor or a staff member, and someone gets on this Facebook and says the sorts of things that have been said about me on council. Fortunately, I can switch off to it, it doesn't bother me. But there are people who would get offended and who'd want to take it further. Now, McLeod's, the Shire's lawyers, going to back me as a councillor? I don't think so. Maybe they'll back the staff as a part of their employment and their employment contracts, but I'm sure they won't back us as councillors, as politicians who say things out in the open sphere are also liable for their own actions. So that's the reason why I'm against it. I'm worried about this motion, the fact that it says consider a Facebook page will be taken as that we're going to accept the Facebook page. And as it's a two-way street, and as you can get negative comments coming back, as a Facebook user, I see the absolute crap that's on it from day to day. I don't see there's any value to the Shire at all, and I would hate to see us dedicating resources and staff time on promoting something like this when there's Instagram is a one-way thing that gets our message across, and we've got a Shire website that does that perfectly well, perfectly good as well.
For the motion, Councillor Lovett.
Thank you, Mr. President. My comments relate specifically to the Facebook component of this motion. The statistics that we were given last week were interesting, and the ones that are in this report, that 54.49% of the City of Bunbury population use Facebook there. I don't believe that's a fully accurate figure, as many people from outside the City of Bunbury follow that page for business and tourism interests. And that's the same for most shires. The Shire of Wiluna has a population of only 720 and a page like of 442. And knowing that particular area, I know that a large percentage of that would be from outside the area. Facebook's a very useful business tool. You would be hard pressed to find a large business that is not using it. Some of the updates recently for the Leisure Drive car park construction have actually gone onto the local community Facebook pages via Carboni Brothers Facebook page themselves. They're the ones sharing the information. Many councils don't have a Shire account, but like we do, accounts for rec centres. Both of our rec centres have Facebook accounts. Libraries, events and tourism in some shires have separate pages. I did query last week which LGA do not have a Facebook page. And City of Mandurah was quoted as one that does not have Facebook. They do, and they have 17,500 likes on it. Their recreation centres have another 6,000. Their libraries utilise the main account. The Mayor has his own with a following of 4,800 likes. And Visit Mandurah, their tourism one, which relates obviously to earlier discussions here, they have 14,000 likes on their Visit Mandurah page. Walga has policies and procedures available, and Walga actually run their own Facebook page. I admin 4 separate pages as opposed to a personal account, and I also mentor, manage a number of group pages as well. I've undertaken formal Facebook training or social media training. It is not that difficult to build an audience and create something successful, and I believe that it definitely needs to be a part of our strategy.
Speaker against, Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to take the point of Mr. Eden that it is to consider a Facebook page as the development of the communication strategy, which I think we need. The problem that I'm seeing is that the focus is on Facebook, whether we have it or not part of an overall strategy. And I've done a little bit of research of my own, and Councillor Drummond posted the other day, I found, and the first couple of posts that came back, please do, then we can be sure our complaints are being heard. Facebook's not a place for complaints. If you've got a complaint, you ring up or you send a letter in or you go in online into the pages that we have on our website. Well, they don't listen to public meetings. That was another comment. There's a councillor, and I know it's not in our area, but she's been attacked on Facebook to the point that she's had to resign. She says, this came from the ABC, so I'm trusting that it's fairly accurate. It's one thing to read what people say about a council, it is another thing to see what they say about you personally. And there's quite a few other comments, but it says, the social media abuse is phenomenal. It's ongoing, it never stops. But when it starts to affect your partner, it's not good, and I won't tolerate this sort of thing. So it's full of those sort of negatives. I went and actually researched Facebook itself, and according to Facebook, when business posts to Facebook, it only reaches about 16% of its intended audience. And looking down at the figures that have been provided by staff, is some 13% there, some 16s, 15s. I know I'm being selective, but nonetheless, those figures are in there that bears weight to this. And as Councillor Lovett has said, a lot of these comments, you don't know where they're coming from. Someone in Port Hedland could be commenting about a proposal that we've got down here. So I would like to think that we're going to have a communication strategy, but I'd hate to think that the focus is purely and simply on Facebook. It just doesn't work without all the other platforms that go with it. Even the staff have said in their report, ability to have roster of staff, which includes coverage outside normal business hours, who will monitor comments and feel confident to respond to them. This thing is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. And if things go unanswered, the next thing is there'll be more comments. I'll put that on Facebook, no one's answered me. I can remember the time starting here when we didn't even have a fax machine. And it was all done by letter. As soon as we got a fax, oh, can you stick it on the fax? Then we got email, I'll put this on the fax line. No, I want it on email. Then you got an email, and 10 minutes later you got a phone call. So I emailed you 10 minutes ago, I haven't had an answer yet. Facebook is no different.
That was being right around the back, head in the bike, I really produced electricity, wasn't it?
So Facebook probably in its day was a good platform, but it's now a wasteland. It's of social media, and I think Councillor Kabani summed it up. Instagram is brilliant. You put a picture on there, happy snaps, get the message out, and when you go and find it tomorrow, you can't find it, so no one can comment on it. But they're the sort of thing. But I will support this motion in as much as it's going for a communication strategy. I want to make sure that it is just not focused purely and simply on Facebook, as that's what it says in there. It's costly, it's time consuming. We had a lady here, and I think she was from Kalgoorlie some years ago, talking about Facebook and why we should have it. And she was telling us that she checked Facebook of a night time before she went to bed, and if there's anything needed doing, she emailed the CEO. First thing in the morning before she brushed her teeth, she was on Facebook again, making sure things should be done. That's the sort of culture that will happen if we end up with this. Let's go down the communication strategy and let's have a look what it is, but please do not focus purely on Facebook. It's been said in this chamber, we are one of the few shires in this area that don't have Facebook. I can tell you that Dardnap and Capel don't have swimming pools, but you've not got a backhoe digging a hole down there right now because simply we've got a swimming pool, and so has Bunbury, and so has Bustleton. That is a false argument. Because someone else has got it, we should have it. Don't agree with that. I agree we should investigate it, but I want to caution that we do it responsibly, and all the questions that we have get answered before we say, yes, let's launch it.
Thank you, Councillor. Question, Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. President. Even further back to that, Councillor Beach, I used to use a telex machine, but I'm now a prolific Facebooker as well. I think we need to focus on the fact that this is the development of a strategy. Any strategy worth its weight will have a look at all options on the table, past, present, future. They'll also look at the financial and legal risks, and they'll work out how to manage and mitigate those risks. So without that strategy, this is a bit of a whirlpool of an argument because it can't go anywhere. That strategy has to include Facebook. It has to include Twitter. It has to include websites and anything else that might develop over the next 12 months. It has to include it, and it also has to include the risks to council and councillors. That's just how it has to be. That's what the strategy is for. And I think the focus on Facebook is a bit of a time waster going around at the moment.
Councillor Blunt.
Just a question, CEO, if I may. So in Councillor Brom's recommendation, motion, it says request the CEO to complete the communication strategy and implement the recommended communication platforms within the resources provided by the 2021. Is that achievable to do and do well? Is that enough time to be able to get those outcomes? Probably.
I have had discussions with Councillor Bromman as part of the recommendation. It does say for the communication strategy to be finalised in 2021 due to the workload of the marketing and communications officer in developing the website. If this is to be done in the first half of the financial year, it would need funding from a contractor or a consultant to assist with the development of the strategy just due to workload. So that would be required to be included in the budget for 2021. And if there was a rollout of the recommended communications platforms and that included Facebook, then there will be a requirement to include an additional resource in the Shire's draft budget as well. So it will depend when council considers the draft budget, whether they wish to fund those projects and those resources. But as part of that, getting that in within that particular timing, within the first half of the financial year, that would be what would be required, and then obviously resourcing whatever is implemented by council or required to be implemented by council after the fact.
Question, Councillor. Question. I can't see that, apart from a bit more detail, I can't see where this motion differs a great deal from the officer recommendation. I think it says it in a few words. Considers the development of financial impacts all there. I can't see what's wrong with the officer's recommendation. What is the fundamental difference? Please. That's the question. What's the fundamental difference?
I'll pass it through to Councillor Bromman.
The fundamental difference is we are asking to look at Facebook as part of the communication strategy, and that we actually do consider using it. It is used by many people, as I said, within the Shire. It is used by every community group in the Shire.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Councillor Berg, want to give a question?
No, I want to speak against. Yeah, this, as was just pointed out, I wanted to make sure that people are aware that this motion says Facebook will be a part of the development of the communication strategy, whereas the officer's recommendation says that Facebook will be considered alongside. For that reason, I want to speak against this, because Facebook can be good, but it can be bad as well. But it needs to be considered, as Councillor Coleman said, in amongst everything else. I don't believe it's a be-all and end-all, though. It shouldn't be touted as such. But that's my belief. And that's my belief. And it is very, very time consuming, whether it's a personal page you're admitting or you're admitting anybody else's page. Very, very time consuming. So bear that in mind when it comes to the fact that we've got to resource somebody to do that. That's it. I've got nothing else to say.
Any other speakers for? Again? Close. Yeah, long, like close.
Okay, Theory is a very useful tool. We can be afraid of what other people are saying, but we can also reply and provide them with education and understanding of why we make the decisions we do. And I think this is a very important element of what I'm talking about here. Not long ago, we had a firewall we put out, and I put it on Facebook for everyone, and I got notes back saying, thanks very much, simply because I wouldn't have known about it if you hadn't put it on Facebook for us. Right? The other thing is, when you talk about strategy, and this council has said that it is inclusive, we should look at an inclusive communication strategy. That means not which allows us to use all the sources in relation to the way we communicate with our stakeholders. Facebook does, however, provide them with the opportunity to comment. I know some people might fear that, but for me, that is not a problem, because sometimes we make mistakes, and we should live up to them. If we can't do that, there's an issue. When we talk about how many people use Facebook, there is no other council in the southwest that does not. Many of the councils smaller than us in the wheat belt have Facebook also. Facebook, as I said before, is only part of the strategy, but it should be one of the elements that we use.
So I'll put the motion. Is there anyone against the motion? Motion carried. 7-6. Item 14, notice of motion following meeting. Item 15, questions by members of which due notice has been given. Item 16, reports of members have been sent to Tim Camp. Item 17, seal register. Recommendation on page 11. Move Councillor Lovett, second Councillor Jackson. Put the motion. Anyone against the motion? Motion's carried. Item 18, new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of meeting. 18.1, move Councillor Dickinson. Move Councillor Dickinson, second Councillor Beach. Put the motion. Anyone against the motion? Motion carried. Okay. Item 18.1, Harvey Community Hub.
They should
I
be
didn't have one, but I read it
Online.
I just should be placing something here.
Now, the Harvey Community Hub Master Plan Development, there is a correction to the officer's recommendation. Just as I read it out, that Council 1 endorses the procurement of a master plan for the development of the Harvey Community Hub, and 2 notes that the extent and scale of the development will be further determined once the master plan has been developed. Councillor Brom, move. Second, Councillor Dickinson. Right, so be any questions, any discussion? Put the motion. Anyone against the motion? 1. Motion is carried 12-1. Okay, item 19, matters behind closed doors is nil. Heading back to item 9. Which is announcements by presiding member or CEO without discussion. I attended luncheon at National Leisure Centre, which was organised by the staff. of the Senate, and that was to thank the CEO for keeping all the staff employed during this time of COVID-19. They're extremely grateful for the support from not only Annie as CEO, but also of council, and just wanted that message relayed back to every councillor. Annie was presented with a lovely bunch of flowers and chocolate. The guy was shotgun. Annie missed out on the chocolate, so I think ones I got were a little bit better. But on behalf of council, can I also extend a huge thank you to all of our staff within the Harvey Shire. It has been a very challenging time for everyone within the community, but to all of our staff, they've played a major role in providing some form of normality and providing a wonderful customer service, helping with Meals on Wheels, taking on new tasks within the organisation. You've thrown a couple of storms to the outside crew. You know, it's been amazing. Improvements to the rec centres that probably haven't been seen for a number of years and being brought forward. How the libraries were operated, it has been fantastic. So from all of us as council, to all of our staff, huge thank you, and we take our hats off to you. So thank you very much. And then apparently, you need a glass of water to wash down the chocolate. So I'll declare the meeting closed at 5:56, and thank you everyone for your attendance. Have a great night.